Book 001, Law of Salimi, Chapter 53, Dragon Slayer. If you could still remember one particular chapter which I wrote regarding my interview application for scholarship funding on my PhD program at the university, I wrote about an unknown danger. Since 2007, when I began pursuing the scholarship, I knew several things that would be certain to occur if I received the scholarship funding. I had to prepare myself, including removing every burden that I might carry during the journey for my PhD study. One of them was the fact that studying for PhD program from a degree program would mean that I do not have any master program as my backup. Second, I had to be single and free from any unnecessary burden in my life during my study because anything could happen during the PhD program. In doing so, by 2008, I received the scholarship funding where I began my PhD study at the university in July of the same year. I had full intention to complete my PhD program within the 4 years stipulated duration as required by the scholarship terms of agreement. As time goes by, I discovered more knowledge than I probably should in order to complete my PhD program within the 4 years time limit that I had to abide. As a person who is truly passionate about knowledge and learning, it could be arguably dangerous for me to be allowed with a huge sum of funding to do my research. I would assume that about half of my research funding of Rm 120,000 was spent on procurement of books and research materials, references, tools, events, conferences, conventions, and numerous other research-related items until I was strictly forbidden by my supervisor from purchasing any new materials. He advised me to stop adding new materials and knowledge while focused on writing my PhD thesis. As I followed his advice, I continued my observation while writing my PhD thesis. Essentially, it was not that difficult to write about 100,000 words of research thesis. Notwithstanding, my research had uncovered several rather sensitive findings that might be perceived as controversial among several related organizations in Malaysia, which I was advised to omit them from my research. This was the difficult part that I was struggling with. As I was implementing everything that I had learned into my actual life, it was seemingly extremely difficult for me to omit certain facts that I had discovered in my research because of its sensitive and controversial nature. Basically, if I included those sensitive findings, it would mean that I would not pass my PhD program and my thesis might be rejected. Even though my supervisor had advised me to only omit the findings for the PhD thesis, where I was free to write about it after completing my PhD program as a full-fledged Doctor of Philosophy, it was very difficult for me to swallow. In short, it created cognitive dissonance inside my mind, which would contrast to my actual practice in my life. I felt as if I was denying the truth, even if it was simply just this one time, so that I could complete my PhD program and acquire my PhD certificate. It was very similar scenario as when I was studying global marketing during my degree, where I cannot remove my understandings of Islam in my answers for final examination. My stubbornness back then had caused my CGPA to plummet because I refused to remove my knowledge about Islam. This time, if I chose to be stubborn about not omitting the sensitive findings, it seemed that I might have to endure much more than simply a lower CGPA for my academic performance. This time, I might stand to lose my opportunity to complete my PhD program and possibly fail my PhD certificate from the university by doing so. By doing so, I might be required to repay my sum of scholarship, which amount to Rm 120,000 back to the university. As you, the reader, had already read the first chapter of my book, I am absolutely certain that you could have guessed on which choice did I had made in my life. So let me just explain to you what really happened to me which led to the choice that I made. When I received the scholarship in 2008, I knew that I had just stepped on the tail of a huge sleeping dragon that might possibly wake up and bite my head off or burn me to a crisp. At the moment of writing this particular section of the book, about 7 years later, the dragon has woken up and was pissed off with my choice in my life. Obviously, this was a philosophical dragon which came in the form of scholarship repayment to the university. After so many chapters that had been written from the very beginning of my life story, we had finally arrived at this section where I would provide you, the reader, with the answers for all of those questions asked in the early parts of this book. As I would love to remind the reader that this is still my real life story, which actually happened to me in my life. I am currently in debt for Rm 120,000 to the university, where I could be dragged into the brink of bankruptcy at any given time at this very moment of my life. I am not trying to make up lies and justifications with what had happened to my life which led to this huge debt. I am not writing to complain about anything, but simply to share my life story where I need to face against this huge dragon hovering over my life. If I died before being able to repay the whole debt, I would have very high probability to end up in hellfire in the afterlife due to it. This is my main concern in my life right now, albeit do not feel too sad about me or think that I wrote this book about my true life story in search of pity or charity from anyone, because I did not wish to do so. The question facing myself was the fact that, am I a dragon slayer or am I a coward who ran away from my problems? Every time I asked myself the question, I was always reminded of my life experience that I had endured, which led me to this current position of my life. I was reminded by, I say what I did and I do what I said. Based on the writing of my life in this book, I sure had said many things in my life. I surely had done numerous exciting things throughout my life so far. Would I dare to be a coward and run away from my debt after having lived an adventurous life? Am I truly a coward who feared a huge debt in the form of philosophical dragon and simply cower in defeat? This choice in my life could be argued by thousands of scholars all over the world, which would still might not agree with my choice. I am not a coward. I do not fear death. I do not fear failure. I do not fear with anything that others might say. What others might say about me. I do not give a single damn about anything that other human being might assume about me. They might just curse me to hell for all I care, because I do not afraid of anything except Allah the Almighty. I knew deep in my heart that everything that had ever happened to my life were merely tests provided by Allah the All-Knowing. Each one was a test to see whether am I whether I am a good Muslim or not, whether I practice the teachings of Islam or not in my life. Hence, when it comes to the question of my PhD thesis, I had to decide that I would not omit my findings regardless the result that might lead to my failure of my thesis. My choice would simply mean that the dragon has just woke up from the 7 years of slumber and seemed very furious with my choice in life. I do not fear a dragon. I will become a dragon slayer. I fear nothing in this universe and beyond except Allah the Almighty. To me, the choice of omitting the findings would meant that I had failed the test given by Allah the All-Knowing. In order for me to stay true with my life and keep my heart steadfast, I need to choose the one where I had to fail my PhD program and borne the burden of the huge debt in my life. I need to choose failure from the eyes of others and the masses society in order for me to succeed the test that had been given by Allah the Merciful. I felt that the true test given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was simply whether I had faith in Him and able to accept defeat, unemployment, huge debts, negative perception from society in order to remain true in my heart. As I said earlier, thousands of scholars or academicians could argue about my choice. Furthermore, psychologists and social scientists all over the world could debate over my stupidity or insanity for making this decision. The one thing that I am absolutely certain was the fact that I had no regret in my choice, where I had absolute faith in Allah the Almighty, who is the only giver and provider of risk or sustenance to everyone and everything on this universe and beyond, which including my own life and future. It means that I am certain that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone would be enough for me to resolve my debt through effort and hard work if Allah the All-Knowing wills it so. As for my 7 years effort for doing my PhD, where I ended up without any titles or PhD certificate, I also had no regrets because my intention was simply to gain knowledge so that I could be closer into the path of Islam, being a true Muslim, receive the path and guidance of Allah the Merciful. When I look back at my life before my journey for PhD program, I smiled because I knew that Allah the Almighty had granted my prayer in pursuit of knowledge and learning in my life journey. A part of that, I had finally reached a point in my life where I am truly able to make the decision which signified that my faith in Allah the Almighty is beyond anything on this universe could ever provide for me. At this moment in time, the dragon is circling over my life with ferocity to destroy my life, while I had the faith to Allah the Merciful to protect me. Hence, I am not worried. I had applied for several teaching positions while writing this third book of my real life experience with the hope that I could self-publish this book as an e-book and to be sold all over the world. After contacting to publishing companies, it seemed that I could not afford to pay for any of their services given my present situation. So I made up my mind to publish this book on my own volition without any editing services for this first ebook version. I truly hope that the reader would be understanding, considering that my English language was not at par with professional writing of other experts in these publishing industries. Nonetheless, I would hope that in the future, if I could generate some income from the sale of this ebook version, I could finally pay for publishing companies for the proper publication services, which include editing and professional advices. For now, I am just happy to share my life story with anyone who had read this book, and hopefully it had provided some beneficial knowledge to the reader. Moreover, with my own format of ebook, I could write as I wished without any limitation and restriction which came from any publishing companies that I had spoken with. In short, after I had reached my 6th year, the university had sent me a letter terminating my status as a student as well as requiring me to repay the scholarship amount of 122,000 ringgit Malaysia. It was possible for me to fight, but I chose to accept it and currently postpone my study at PhD level in the university. In doing so, I decided to focus on finding ways to repay the debt, which led me to write this book about my life story and sharing my life experience with the readers. That ends the chapter 53 and hope to hear you soon in the next chapter. Thank you for listening.